like, yeah, I can't even imagine too. Like it's something that you feel really excited about. Like there's that scene in Jennifer's Body where she's
Mhm.
like admiring herself and like she like burns her tongue and then it heals and she's like, I am a god.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum. In today's episode, I am joined with Lauren from Analyzing Horror with Lauren. We are going to be talking today about the parallels between Ginger Snaps and Jennifer's Body. So Ginger Snaps came out in 2000. Jennifer's Body came out 9 years later in 2009. And there are some phenomenal things going on between these two movies. And I think we chatted back and forth about this on Twitter and decided I said I thought it'd be a really cool episode. So,
Yeah.
here we are. So Lauren, tell me a little bit about your YouTube channel and what you do.
Well, I am a horror movie reviewer. I basically started on Letterboxd just writing my personal opinions, and I had a bunch of people say you would kill it on YouTube, and so I kind of just am like verbally expressing my opinions from my Letterboxd. But yeah, I kind of try to mix in like facts, like just giving a rundown of the movie. I always love to look behind the scenes. I love like score, cinematography, stuff like that. But then I also sprinkle my personal opinions and my journey with the movie, as well as just what I liked about it. And stuff like that. So yeah, it's been only about 4 months, but I've been loving it so far.
Yeah, I think you're doing great. I watch your reviews. I think that and I like the concept you use, like you did the comparison between like Firestarter, the remake, and the original, and that's all really good. Yeah,
I love that series that I've been doing. That's been a lot of fun.
yeah.
I recently did the Blob, the original and the remake, and that one was a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, it's really cool stuff. As always, I'll link all of Lauren's stuff in the description below, so you definitely check out her channel and subscribe to that. And then I'll put her socials as well in the description for this episode as well. So let's see. So Ginger Snaps came out in 2000. The story of two outcast sisters, Ginger and Bridget, in the mindless suburban town of Bailey Downs. On the night of Ginger's first period, she is savagely attacked by a wild creature. Ginger's wounds miraculously heal, but something is not quite right. Now Bridget must save her sister and save herself. That has, let's see, a 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb, a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, 91% on Google. And I don't think I've ever seen this before, but this actually gave me the 4.5 out of 5 on Shudder, which is neat. I've never seen that.
People are ruthless on Shudder.
I watched so many Two Skull movies, and I'm like, why did it only get 2 skulls?
I know. Do you ever scroll through the comments? There's either like, this is a perfect movie or this is rubbish.
Yep. And I tend to hate the ones they love and love the ones they hate.
Yep. It's all subjective.
It is. That's true. We all have different boxes to check in the horror genre. Yeah. That's true. I've never seen that come up when I've searched for a movie, though. Like Shudder's not normally one of those, so that's interesting. But yeah, so that's not horrible. That's pretty good. I think the lowest one was the IMDb. But so I saw Ginger Snaps for the first time when I was a teenager. I think my sister probably thought it would be a good coming of age, but I rewatched it. When did I rewatch it? I think I rewatched it for the first time in years. The beginning of this year when I was getting ready to do a werewolf movie. I mean, a werewolf video. And I got so much more out of it as an adult woman than I did as a teenager.
Yeah, I bet. I watched it for the first time only 2 years ago, actually. Oh, wow. So I envy that experience of watching it as a young woman, because I bet that would have been crazy. Quick side note, but I watched Teeth when I was a teenager. So for general context, so I feel like those would kind of pair well together as like a weird coming of age. But
these are the things you need to know about feminine sexuality.
Oh my God, that movie is so weird. And all you can do is just laugh.
It's so true. And it's like, yeah, the laughing is good. And I think the other thing I noticed when I was watching it was like, I was surprised at the things that should have made me uncomfortable that really didn't.
it's like so horrifying, but it's also good for you. Like
Yes.
kind of, but also
I'm oddly happy for you.
I
Yes, I
know.
agree.
Oh man. But yeah, for context, that is the type of movie
Okay.
that I was watching when I was a teenager. So this would have fit right in. But for some reason, it just flew over my radar.
Yeah.
But I had watched like a YouTube recommendation, like
Oh,
werewolf movies and ginger snaps. And I just recently subscribed to Shudder and it's like, oh, it's on here. Might as well
yep.
watch it. And I think I watched it like 3 times, like in 48 hours. Like I just really loved it.
Yeah,
And
me too.
just like what we're here for, talking about the comparisons of Jennifer's body, and yeah, just like all of the homage from
Yeah.
that
Well,
movie.
and I think it's a testament to the films too, because I think even though they're about teenagers, and spoiler alert, Angel's not a teenager. I do think that it's still like it still spoke to me as a female.
Mhm.
Like I didn't
Yeah.
feel, like it was outdated because it had to be with a teenager. But
Oh,
I think one of my favorite things about Ginger Snaps specifically was just the balance between these moments of like I found myself really like into these things where I kind of felt, I don't want to say humored because I don't think it's a funny film. It's actually kind of dark.
yeah.
But I think that there were these moments where I was just kind of like, yeah, okay. Like I just kind of was like on board with what was happening.
Yeah.
And I also really love the relationship between the sisters. I'm
Mhm.
really close to my sisters, and I just felt like that kind of spoke to me too. But I think overall, it's also a really good werewolf movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. I Speaking on the werewolf, I actually really love that like we don't get a ton of the werewolf. And I
Yeah.
love when movies do that. They let your
Yep.
imagination run wild with it.
Yes.
But what we do see is really great. And like that park scene with the initial attack was really,
So
really
cool.
great. But then also what you're saying about sisterhood, I think that that relationship was done really well.
Yeah.
I also like that it was kind of complex because like the opening
Yeah.
scene where they're taking pictures of these really morbid, melancholy images and like
Yeah.
they're doing it as sisters, like it's just our little sister
Their little
activity.
bonding thing.
Yeah, and don't
Yeah.
they cut their hands and like do that little thing in the bedroom as
Yeah.
well? Yeah. So I really like that there is definitely a bond there, but it
Yeah.
also is somewhat complicated. Like I don't know if toxic is the right word, but it's definitely not like a healthy relationship in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
I think there's some stuff to unpack there for sure. Yeah.
yeah, but I just like
Yeah.
that not just like, oh, we're sisters and we're best friends, but there's just like more complexities to it.
Yeah, because I think when you see sister relationships so much in all kinds of film, it doesn't really matter the genre. They're either horrible, like they hate each other, or they're so happy to be best friends that there's like no
Yeah.
reality to either side of that. Because I think
Yeah.
like one of the things that they do so well with Ginger Snaps is like loving someone, but knowing that you have to do what's right for them in these
Yeah.
moments of like, where it's, I mean, literally life or death. And I think that
Yeah.
they nailed that. Like they did so great.
They definitely did.
Yeah.
And I know we're not trying to ruin the ending or anything, but I feel
Yep.
like that was definitely a theme in the ending. And I very much appreciate that. And I feel like I
Yeah.
forget the younger sister's name, but I felt like I identified with her despite being the big sister in my personal life.
Oh,
but
yeah.
but
Bridget.
yeah,
Bridget's the younger sister,
Bridget,
I think. Yeah.
right.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, I think well, it's funny because I have younger sisters too. And I felt more along. I aligned more with her too.
Hmm.
I agree. I think the sister relationship is a really important part. And I also love that they bring in the picture stuff that they're doing at the beginning.
Hmm.
When things start kind of going crazy, that comes back into play when they're having to like fix something that they did. They're like getting rid of their mess up from their photo shoot.
Yeah.
I thought that was really clever.
Yeah. No, I thought that was really well done. I also, I just really love that opening scene because I just feel like that sets such a great tone. And then it's also sprinkled throughout the story. And it just
Yeah.
was, I really loved that. Um,
Yeah.
and I also think it's kind of funny because they start off like relatively dark people like taking pictures like that. But then
Yeah.
when like the bite happens and like actual
It's like,
stuff goes down, it's like, oh, like things can get so much darker. And like all of a sudden we're not badasses anymore.
that's so true. I didn't even think about that. That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, and I think as far as like I liked that they were different kind of weirdos. Like I think
Yeah.
when you come into stories with people who were like the outcasts, it's just because of the way that they dress or they're from this bad side of town, or it's all these like cliches. And this kind of stepped away from that, especially with the opening scene, like what you're saying is like
Mhm.
setting the tone for the rest of the film and who these women are, these young women are as like
Mhm.
these individual people. So yeah, I loved it. Ginger Snaps is one of my favorite werewolf movies. Probably one of my favorite, like, women power kind of movie. I love it. I think it's really good.
Yeah, yeah. Like we keep saying about the sister relationship as well as
Yeah.
just like coming of age, and I think it's really interesting how the movie ties like the werewolf bite because she's on her first period and like werewolf smell blood, and I just think that's so interesting and it
Yeah.
so feminine, right? Like like
It
all of a sudden
is.
just
It
being a
is.
woman feels so vulnerable being out there in a werewolf, which I'm sure says something else. So
Very much so. Yes.
So, but yeah,
Yeah.
like I love all that symbolism and like you said, like it's a great werewolf movie, like surface level, but also if
Mhm.
you like dig a little bit, there's so much more there.
Yeah, there's a lot to break down for sure.
Definitely.
And then so Jennifer's Body, let's see, that came out 9 years later, 2009. I'm not really surprised at how much detail they put in these synopses. They're normally only like a couple sentences. When a demon takes possession of her, high school hottie Jennifer turns a hungry eye on guys who never stood a chance with her before. While evil Jennifer satisfies her appetite for human flesh with the school's male population, her nerdy friend Needy learns what's happening and vows to put an end to the carnage. Let's see, 5.4 out of 10 on IMDb, a 45% on Rotten Tomatoes, and 82% on Google, and a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Goodness. Disagree.
Yeah, I don't agree. So the first time I saw Jennifer's Body was when it first came out, and I I didn't like it. The first time I watched it, I was like not a huge Megan Fox fan at all.
That era.
I've learned a lot about her. My opinions have changed immensely, but I wasn't like a huge Megan Fox fan. I really didn't like it. And then I grew up a little bit and I had like my own like woman awakening, whatever you want to call it, where I started to see things a lot differently. And I went back and watched it, and it was just like it was like watching it for the first time. Like it
Yeah.
was seeing it through this totally different lens. And it's a little bit more comedic to me than Ginger Snaps, but I
Yeah.
think it also has a lot of grit to it. It's definitely not just like a horror comedy. I think it's got some layers to it too. But I really like Jennifer's Body. I think it's a super underrated film. I think it is one of Megan Fox's best performances.
Yeah.
And I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I envy you also again to see it in theaters because I remember whatever the exact opposite of hype was. Like everyone was just trashing on the movie when it was first coming out. It's like this is
Yes.
terrible, and
Yep.
yeah, and it was like that era. It's like it was cool to hate Megan Fox for some reason.
Yes.
And then also the marketing made it seem like it was just Megan being sexy for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and so I didn't watch it. I heard so many people not liking it. It was just like,
Mhm.
oh well, like I don't want to watch that. And I
Yeah.
think like a
Yeah.
couple of years after that, I ended up just watching it because I was curious and
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. I was surprised at Megan's performance. I think like I saw her in Transformers, but outside of that, I hadn't seen much of like her performances.
Yeah.
So I thought she did a really great job. I loved Amanda Seyfried as Needy.
Of
Like she's one
course.
of my favorite characters. I
She's
love her so much.
fantastic. Yeah.
But then Adam Driver, uh, the guy that plays like the band leader. I think when you're pretty in Hollywood, like people just think that you have it all. Like I guess I also think of Britney Spears in that way, but it's
Yes.
definitely not as picture perfect as you may think. And I just really love how,
Yeah.
in a way, Jennifer was trying to connect with Megan in that sense, where she's seen as a pretty face, like in high school and stuff, but she has like much more underneath the skin.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that and this kind of goes back to a little bit about what we talked about with Ginger Snaps, but I think the friendship element is one of my favorite parts of this one too, because even though they're not sisters, it's this very unique dynamic of friendship that I think I just found really interesting. Because again, the first time I watched it, I didn't care for it, but when I watched it again later, I actually found that to be one of my favorite things about it, aside from this whole like transformation stage that she goes through. I really loved the friendship between Jennifer and Needy a lot.
Um, Yeah, Needy goes through a bit of a transformation herself, and I really
Yeah.
love that. Just how like she starts off really mousy and lets
Mhm.
Jennifer kind of like walk all over her, and then she starts, like to fight back and really investigate what's going on. And then
Mhm.
by the very, very end, like obviously I'm not going to spoil it, but what she does at the
Sure.
very end is I love it so much, and I just like I really identify with her character, and I feel like
Yeah.
even though I'm an adult woman right now, I can really like hone in like teenage Lauren and
Yes.
appreciate like that transformation. It's like, yes, same girl. Like,
Yeah, no, I went through this. I actually same thing. I was super more aligned with her. I went through that too. My high school career started very different than it ended. I can tell you that. Like by the time I reached a certain point, I didn't care anymore about anything that had to do with high school. Like I became a very different person, and that continued over the years. But yeah, I think that I think that's what's so great, honestly, about both movies is that both movies have more than one theme, more than one point, more than one message,
yeah,
more than one strong female character. They both have two female leads as far as, I'm concerned. Um
absolutely. Mhm.
the titles, obviously is Ginger and Jennifer, but
Yeah.
that's not they are not the only female leads. They aren't our
Mhm.
like, our big final girl moments that you think like going into these movies, have you never seen them? You're not really maybe not know what to expect.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
yeah, and then because these movies are set up the way that they are with the storytelling and all these themes and all these layers, there's a ton of parallels between these two movies.
Yeah.
Um, which is something I had not thought about before. And then I think I shared this article or I talked about it, but there was an article I saw that was talking about the comparison between the two
Mhm.
movies. And I went and looked at the article and it had these like shot for shot scenes that are similar to each other.
Mhm.
Obviously not the exact same, but and the biggest one that made me go, like really made me think about it was the hallway when,
Yeah.
after Ginger is bitten and there's that scene where she goes back to school and she's walking down the hallway with this like new
Mhm.
sense of like empowerment. And
Yeah.
the same thing with Jennifer's body. When she goes down the hall, it's a different stage of her story. But
Yeah.
when she comes down the hall, it's like that same presence. It's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The comparison in both of the
Yeah.
hallway scenes are so powerful. And
Yes.
yeah, and it kind of goes back to like coming of age and womanhood and like just like for lack of a better word, just like feeling yourself and feeling like you
Yeah.
are coming into yourself.
Yeah.
It's interesting because obviously they're going through so much more
Sure.
sinister things, but you can identify with it at the same time. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting how they're almost identical scenes. And I guess I don't know for a fact if Jennifer's body was
Was.
inspired or they probably are because they're so close together. But I just think that's really, really cool. I remember watching
Yeah.
Ginger Snaps and being like, that looks very familiar. And then I watched
Yes.
Jennifer's Body. It's like, oh my God, that's where it's from.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it either. I remember when I watched because I had seen Jennifer's Body for the second time before I rewatched Ginger Snaps, and I remember thinking the same thing, but not being sure why it felt so familiar to me.
Yeah.
And then I saw the article, and I was like, "Oh, no kidding! Like that's probably why I thought that." Yeah,
Yeah.
um, and I think the biggest parallel is these teenage girls being taken over by these monsters at the peak of turning into women.
Yes.
Ginger's is a little bit more lined as far as because of the whole like period thing.
Right.
And then she that's the night that she's bitten. That's her coming into womanhood, and it's like
Mhm.
paralleling with becoming a werewolf, which
Yeah.
is not too far off base. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah.
Um yeah, and then Jennifer's is the whole like their attempt. This is the beginning, so this isn't like a huge spoiler, but their intention is they have to kill a virgin to get what they're trying
Mhm.
to get, and well, that doesn't really go the way they thought it was going to
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
Yeah. You saying that actually made me think it's funny because they didn't get what they wanted in the sense that she wasn't a virgin, but didn't they kind of climb the ladder as a band? I think I might have found a plot hole. How did they?
oh, because that's what the point was, right? Was to
Yeah,
like,
so that
yeah,
the
yeah,
the devil would help them with their band. So they
yeah,
got help, but it also wasn't a. Maybe they got like half points because it was a woman. It just wasn't a virgin. I don't
yeah,
know,
and then yeah. Well,
but
and I think like I'll choose my wording carefully, but I think that like what's really interesting is this I think that that part of the story when they are like, oh, they're going to sacrifice this virgin. It's
Hmm.
very this sense of I'm trying to think of my words. This sense of violation
Yeah.
and then leaving her to have to deal with the leftover mess that they
Yeah.
have because they have taken this thing from her and now she's left picking up all the pieces is also just like this. I don't know, like watching it a second time, I think realizing what that might have been actually more symbolic of was like hit really hard. Like it was this
Oof.
moment of like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I'm trying, like I said, I'm trying to be careful with my words, YouTube. But like I think that I just think that it's like so interesting because it's like they literally like they took something from her and left her in the dirt to just
Yeah.
figure it out. And so when she comes into this new existence, it's still like it's this demonic possession, kind of aligning the same thing with ginger snaps of this like coming into womanhood, coming into a little bit more controlled sense of sexuality.
Yeah, and what you were saying, like just the event
Yes.
in Jennifer's body was horrific. So that parallel that you're trying to connect it to makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, like taking something and then you having to live with the aftermath of it. I also really love how both movies, the young women that are affected by these monsters, they have their moments of feeling like empowered and strong and what have you, but then at one point they always have like a moment of weakness, and I feel like
Yeah.
that also works with what you were trying to say, or like maybe you
Yes.
like power through it, but then you always have those moments where like it gets you a little bit. So I
Yeah. Well, they still have these moments of vulnerability, these very human girl moments,
Mhm.
these young, I don't know what I'm doing moments, which
Yeah.
are
Mhm.
remind you just how relatable they actually are. Like I've never been possessed by a demon or murdered by a band or turned into a werewolf, but it's so easy to connect these pieces because they show those little glimpses. I think that's a
Yeah.
really smart move from a filmmaking standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that like you said, it makes them feel very human, even though that they are like literally superhuman in a way. And like yeah, I can't even imagine too. Like it's something that you feel really excited about. Like there's that scene in Jennifer's body where she's
Mhm.
like admiring herself and like she like burns her tongue and then it heals and she's like, I am a god.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's just interesting that contrast, and like I keep saying, like you said, it's just very human, where you get really excited about something and then you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing, that like, I
Mhm.
can't share it with anyone. And yeah, so it's very exciting but also lonely for the characters, I feel like.
And I think just to take it a step further as far as, relatability, I think the other thing for me is that at least, from what I remember from puberty, it was so long ago. When I went through puberty, I mean, I remember feeling pretty isolated. And it's weird when you think about it because you have female family members, I have sisters. You said you have sisters, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
As-
So, we have friends that are literally going through the same thing, and yet we feel completely alone
yeah.
because you feel like you're not allowed to talk about these things and you're not allowed to feel bad about these things because it's supposed to
Mhm.
be this good thing, right? Like
Sure.
becoming a woman is this good thing. And it's like, and so it's one of those things where that's literally what happens with them is it's like supposed to be this. I think there's even a conversation in Ginger Snaps when her mother, like their mother is like that, like their mother is such a funny character to me. But she has that conversation about when they get their period. Did you finally get it? Like she's very what I experienced like growing up with female friends. Like these were the mom conversations we had about like these horrible things that happened to us.
Yeah.
And it's so relatable because it is sometimes it did feel like this really great thing, but then when it didn't, you're just kind of left fumbling it and getting through it on your own, even when you're surrounded by people who should care about what you're going through or what you're dealing with, even if it's like I said, not demonic possession or werewolves, but
Yeah.
same thing. It's super relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also could be connected with physicality of like them being possessed, but also like what you were saying, when you feel alone, like emotions are where like you feel like you're
Yeah.
alone, like
Hmm.
maybe being able to relate to other women where it's like, oh, I also got my period, blah, blah, blah. But
Sure.
if you're feeling insecure or like whatever ends up happening, like you kind of like draw within. And I feel like they did that as well. And so relatability is definitely there in that sense.
Yeah. And then I think the other big one for me was these two, and we touched on this a little bit already, but just like going back to, Ginger and Bridget's relationship, and then Jennifer's and Needy's relationship, and these and even though like, and you said this about Ginger Snaps, like the friendship between Jennifer and Needy is not that great. Like
Mhm.
she almost idolizes her. Like she just, I mean, well, Needy almost idolizes Jennifer. She just has these moments where she just looks at her in awe, and she's not really treated the best, and she's bossed around and all these things. And then that's who she goes to when she changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very sweet. I feel like that is relatable with Ginger Snaps as well. Like they have this weird sister relationship, but she's the first one. I mean, she was there during the
She was
attack.
there.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
but
but still, yeah, she's the one that's there through everything. When something crazy comes up, she's the one trying to help her cover it up and
yes,
get through. And it's interesting because I like that they I don't feel like in either instance the relationships are typical. I don't feel like they're overly cliche, because like we mentioned with the sister relationship, that's a very different introduction to a sister relationship than we typically get. And I feel the same way about the friends, because usually when you get friends, you either have the two friends that are on the same level as like they're, I don't know, like really popular
right.
or whatever, or the same level on the other side where they're both outcast and no one pays them
Yeah.
any attention. So this was all, both films show these relationships from a much broader perspective, a little bit more of a different angle.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you used that where like they're on different tiers.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I also feel like that's uh, very real for the average young woman. I'm sure there are exceptions out there, but I personally have experienced a lot of like
Yep.
passive aggressive, like female friendships where they're nice to you, but then they talk behind your back, or like there's always like that not
Mhm.
perfect friendship. And I feel like that is depicted in at least definitely in Jennifer's Body, but in a sense also in
Ginger
Ginger
snaps.
Snaps. I almost said Jennifer Snaps.
It doesn't, I've actually stopped myself a couple of times. It doesn't help that they're both
Yeah, I know they're not helping us here.
yeah, and I think what's also true is I've also had relationships friend wise that we've known each other for so long, and then you hit high school and you're like, who is this person? Like they're so different, and it's because they, one of the two friends developed differently, or one of the two friends started to care about something a little bit different than, I don't know, like it goes across all kinds of things.
Yeah,
But both, in both situations, in Ginger Snaps it's Bridget, and in Jennifer's Body it's Needy, they both kind of sort of get left behind. They're still around, but they're not next to you anymore once, like, and I think it's, yeah, to your point, I think that's super relatable. I know so many people that when I met back up with in high school, like we weren't friends anymore, and there was no other reason other than they were in this group and I was not. Like that really was like they just became different people, their focus was different, and they turn into these, like, stereotypical like catty friends. And I think that I like that these, both in both instances, the sisters and the friends, when they're, which is from a writing perspective, they did not do that. I love that these were more relatable. It's a completely different dynamic. There's layers to it. It's really
yes,
well done.
yeah, definitely well done. And to add on to that, there was something that I thought of where another comparison is
Mhm.
love. Where
Oh
like Jennifer's Body, it's not explicitly said, but it's pretty obvious that like Needy's at least bi, or like there's like a
yeah. Yes.
relationship there of some
Yes.
kind.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
obviously sister love. And I just love how like both of them have that where it's complicated, but they love each other very much. And I think that's what pushes them through like the hard times with the possession or the bite or what have you. I really
Yeah, love is a big motivator for them to even put themselves in the positions to help. Because like,
yeah.
if you're talking about someone you don't care about, you're not helping them get through
Sure.
turning into a werewolf, or like
Yeah.
you're on your own. Like it's not one of those things. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, you're right. And I think it also shows the differences in the types of loves too, because you do also have these semi love interest slash partner type roles in both films. because you've got a couple of different instances with what Jennifer's doing with the killing of the boys. And then of course, you know, the relationship between, I'm totally drawing a blank on his name, Bridget and, oh, I can't think of his name. The guy with the van.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That guy.
you know who I'm talking about. His name. Anyone who's not new here knows the names are not my forte. I go, you know, the person who did this, that person. That's what I'm talking about. So, but it just there's a lot across both stories that have to do with different types of love and attraction and relationships and sexuality, not just from our main character or our main like Jennifer and Ginger specifically, but just like all kinds of different scenarios where these girls end up in these positions with their feelings and what that turns into, you know, as the story goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like with Needy and her boyfriend, and like when Jennifer's going through like the craziness and she's in on it, like she can't like focus in her relationship. And obviously there's love there, but there's love for Jennifer as well. And it's almost like Jennifer needs my love more.
Yeah.
I don't know. That may have been just my interpretation. But
no, I agree. I agree.
So
yeah.
And it is kind of funny because you just told me her name, but the younger sister,
Bridget. Yeah.
She. Sorry,
it happens to me all the time.
Oh my god! But yeah, so like Ginger, when she gets bit and she starts to have that confidence boost, like she starts to, you know, like be like sexually interested and stuff. And
that's true. Yeah.
And I feel like Bridget obviously isn't getting that same attention, but she, like, even if she were to get it, like it's more about gender and like she's prioritizing her sister. And I don't know, I just think that love and then also like selflessness it can definitely be seen in both Bridget and Needy. So
yeah, I agree. It's crazy. I can't imagine a situation where Jennifer's body was not influenced by ginger snaps. There are just so many things. And yet it's not one of those things where you feel like you're watching like a ripoff, right? Like that's happened. I've seen things that I'm like, you took this like straight from, and I get really frustrated by that when it's not like, but this is done so tastefully and respectfully and in such a different way that it feels like it's just this really great relationship between these two movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned towards the beginning of the video that I do original versus remake videos. And that's my biggest thing. I never want to watch a remake that basically is copy and pasting. And I feel like Jennifer's Body and Ginger Snaps, like Jennifer's Body could have very easily basically the copy and paste, but it's a demon instead of a werewolf. But I just really love how like they take their own twists with it. Like there are some plot points that they keep, but it's its own story. And yeah, like it pays tribute to Ginger Snaps in a lot of ways, but it's also like its own story, its own movie, its own ending. And
yes. Yep. And its own characters, even though the relationships, there's parallels there, they're completely different too. Like they're not, you know, aside from the fact that they're friends, like even just the dynamics are so different. Yeah, it just feels like a respectful nod versus a ripoff to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kind of like what you said about the relationships and the friendships. I really love how, again, like we mentioned, like different like popularity tiers. Like I feel like Ginger and Bridget were kind of on the same level, if not Ginger being like one notch above. Whereas Jennifer's Body, like Needy's like all the way down here.
Really different.
Jennifer's like a popular cheerleader. So I just really like the difference of the dynamic. And I think that's another thing that Jennifer's Body does to like pay tribute to Ginger Snaps, where it's like, okay, really love what you've done with this relationship. We're just going to kind of do this with it a little bit. And I just really loved how it was still about like female like relationships and friendships, but it's just like in this category instead of over here.
Yeah, I for one, like, and this is across all kinds of genres and books and I don't know, everything, but I get tired of girls that just don't get along for no reason. I get tired of that. I want to see like women coming together, girls working together, becoming, whether it's friends, sisters, I don't care what it is, lovers, I don't care. I just want to see like this different spin on a much more realistic relationship between two female characters, because this was like, and both movies I think nail this perfectly. Like I think they just go to show you that like it's not all what others have done, and the fact that like no one gets along, everyone hates each other for
Yeah.
no reason. Like I really love that, and I think that that's aside from the sexual empowerment side of it, with the comparison between, you
Mhm.
know, the monster parts of it, like the demon possession and the werewolf being like this huge, you know, talking about them coming into womanhood. I think that
Mhm.
the female relationships is like one of my favorite parts of both movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, they're good horror movies, just with the
Yes.
creatures and the demon possession and stuff like that. Um, but at the same time, like really at the core of it are these relationships, and they drive the movie in a lot of ways. And I
They
feel like if you were to take those out of the movie, it would be fun, but it wouldn't be nearly as impactful.
No, definitely wouldn't linger the same way for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. We wouldn't still be talking about them if they were taken out. So yeah, I think that that's a that and like we keep saying, like femininity and coming of age. Like I feel like those are ultimately what keeps these movies like in people's minds and constantly revisiting them, because there's just so much. Um, it's
Yeah,
just really impactful. There's so much to unpack, and I mean,
there's a lot.
you can watch it so many times, and like both movies still you'd find something new that you didn't notice before.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing actually. I was gonna say, and then no matter how many times you've seen them, you find these little nuggets of things that you didn't notice the first time, especially because there was such a big gap in when I saw them both originally.
Yeah.
And I think like, I mean, yeah, it's in 2022, this movie. So yeah, so Ginger Snaps is 22 years old, and I'm like questioning my math skills. I was like, wait, yes, that's right. And then, you know, with, I mean, and Jennifer's Body being, you know, just 9 years newer, they're older movies that people, like you said, there's still a lot to talk about. I just think we need like more. I want more stuff like this. Like I want like, you know, and I think like, and I know this is like a slightly different reach, but like I'm thinking about like these empowering women and these like these coming of age stories. And I think that's one of the reasons that Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the show, has always been like number one for me. I think it's because
Yeah.
it's essentially the same thing. There's a lot of these like not as gritty, I would say.
Yeah.
So, you know, but I
Sure.
think that I feel like we need more stuff like that. More stuff of
Yeah.
these, like we can go through these journeys with these young women as they're coming of age, and all of these things that fall into what it's like to
Mhm.
be a female in the real world.
Yeah.
Because, you know, growing up, we aren't really like, we don't know until we're thrown into it that that's how awful it is sometimes. You almost want to be eaten by a werewolf. You're like, you know what?
It would be easier at this point.
Yeah, if there's any demons looking for something to do, like knock yourself out. It's not as easy as it looks.
It would make things more interesting for sure. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. There'd probably be a turn of power for sure if like demons ran all the women. I know some people feel like that's the case anyway, but yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. So I love both of these movies, and yeah. Thank you for making time to like talk about these two movies. I enjoyed this. I really love both films, and I think they both speak to me, even being in my 30s. Like they speak to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, these two movies are really great, and feel like they'd be the perfect double feature where you'd be able to point out all of the like similarities and
Yes.
stuff. But yeah, it's just they're both very special and
Mhm.
impactful. And like we keep saying about coming of age, femininity, like the tones of friendship and relationships,
Yeah.
just female to female relationships too, where I feel like
Yeah.
we don't get enough honest representations of those. So
Yeah.
I think that's a huge reason why these movies are so special. But on
I
top of
agree.
the great horror movies.
They are. Yeah. A lot of I know there's a little bit more, there's CGI stuff in Jennifer's Body, but
Sure. Yeah.
the effects in Ginger Snaps are all practical, I think. If
Yeah.
not primarily. I think they're all practical though. And but even the CGI bits in Jennifer's Body were really well done. They make great creature features. They really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier that you don't get to see very much of the werewolf, and I think that's because like they
Right.
had like a small budget as well. But like you said, it works, so it's perfect. And
Yeah.
the CGI in Jennifer's Body, like now that you say it, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, there's CGI in the movie, but like I couldn't like point in my head to a scene, be like,
Yeah,
that's
you're not
super
just like,
CGI.
oh,
So I thought they did a really great job. Like there's a scene where she's like ripping a guy to shreds, but it's all like in a shadow. And I really like that they did that too.
that
Like you
was
don't need to
beautiful.
show it. I don't know. There's just something special about not
Yeah.
having to show everything that I think both movies do really well.
Yeah, and I think from a filmmaking perspective, my professional opinion, when filmmakers make those choices, it always makes it better to me as a viewer when they pick and choose those moments. They pick
Yeah.
the moments to show, they pick the moments to not show, and
Yeah.
that really can make or break a horror experience.
Mhm.
Just because, like I have gripes about movies that show too much, and then I'm desensitized and it's not scary or effective anymore.
Yeah.
And these scenes, like you don't like exactly like what you're talking about with the shadow effect, like you still feel that moment,
Oh, yeah.
even though you don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that seeing too much sometimes just makes you like almost bored, like you said, desensitized. But yeah, you definitely feel that shadow scene. And I think that not showing sometimes is very, very effective.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. No, I agree.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming by.
of course.
That is our comparison between the two films, Ginger Snaps and Jennifer's Body. I believe Ginger Snaps is still on Shudder.
I
Maybe.
think you're right. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Jennifer's Body is streaming somewhere as well, but I don't remember where. Sorry. Yeah, as just I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put all of Lauren's stuff in the description below. Make sure you go check out her channel, especially if you're into horror movies. It's a great place to go. Yeah, that's all I have for this one. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. I will see you in the next one.